Is in broadcast mode, Martin.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another story.
Sophie, do we have Margot yet?
Not yet, no.
I've just tried to do up my collar for the first time in 3 months, and it's been a bit of a nasty shock.
You must be hot. You must be hot. I'm quite hot from where I'm joining. So.
Hi, Margot.
Hello, Adam.
Margot.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Margot.
Hi, Margot.
Hi. Adam, I hope you got the message, but just in case, I've got to leave at 5 to 6. I hope that's okay with you.
Yes, honestly, once you're, I mean, obviously, you want to maybe listen to, but as soon as you're done, you can go. That's absolutely grand.
Oh well, I mean, I'll listen to the next one with interest, but just so you know that I've got to click off by 5 to 6.
No, that's absolutely fine. No, thank you.
Thank you.
I think last time we met, you were launching the industrial strategy, weren't you?
Oh yes,
in Coventry.
Oh, gosh,
yes,
that's quite a
Big
while
TV.
ago now, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, for you, a lifetime away.
Well, not really, because I'm in the thick of I mean, WMG is really all about playing a very important part in the, in the implementation of the industrial strategy. And it's continually evolving. I'm very pleased that the new government have not, shelved it or put it on the back burner. It's that's a good thing.
Sophie, I'll wait for you for the go ahead. We usually allow 2 or 3 minutes, people, for everybody to sign on.
We've got a few more to come in, so.
Yeah, no, that's
Sorry,
fine.
I've lost everybody.
There you go. You're back again.
We've got you, Margot.
Really?
Yeah.
I can't see anything. How strange.
We can see and hear you.
Oh, good. That's very disconcerting.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes. Back.
I can
One
see
of the,
yes.
we try and stick as close as we can to the hour. One of the main organisers of this is apparently an Everton fan, and they kick off at 6 o'clock, so I'm on a 3-line with them. So.
Hello, Martin.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm wearing this headset, not to be different. It's just it stops me hearing the dog bark or the children shout at me. So it's just so I can focus.
Yes, but it must be worth its weight in gold then in that case.
Absolutely.
I am rather worried that you will all hear my puppy barking and my little boy shouting. So I apologise in advance if that happens.
What puppy is it? What puppy is it?
It's a cockapoo.
Oh.
So
and a very yappy cockapoo as well. So can I apologise to every attendee in advance if it gets going. I will mute if I'm not speaking. I'll mute.
Monica's not worried about your child. Just what sort of dog is it?
What breed of child is it, Christine?
my breed of child is the lovely is a different sort of yappy monster, which is a 13-year-old boy. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
So there is a well-worn path to the fridge.
Oh, it's permanent. Yeah.
It only gets worse. It only gets worse.
We're nearing the 100, so we'll just give it 2 more minutes and then off we go.
Martin, somebody asked me earlier today, they said, do you and Martin get together and decide what you're going to talk about and rehearse what you're going to say? No.
Right.
It all just comes out.
Trust me, everyone, it comes together like this.
I was going to say, were they not on the last call?
Yeah. It's seamless.
It is.
Adam, just in terms of housekeeping, are you going to mute us, or should we just mute ourselves when we're not speaking?
If it stays like this and there's no feedback, just keep open. If you start to hear a bit of feedback, just mute yourself when you're not speaking if you can.
My neighbour's house alarm has just gone off. Can you hear that?
No.
That'll set the cockapoo off, don't worry.
Right, one more minute, we'll start at 5 past, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
And Margot, you will only see the panelists, Margot. You won't see all the attendees.
Okay.
Right, everybody, we'll make a start if that's okay. Good afternoon, and thank you all for attending the second virtual meeting of the Coventry and Warwickshire Champions. Today we have around 180 business people from across our patch joining us. So thank you, all of you, for taking the time. Everybody seems to have a busier schedule than when they were actually in their offices, so it is appreciated. As I say, this is our second Champions event online, and attendee numbers have doubled from the first time. My name's Adam Dent of Advent Communications. We're a PR firm based in Coventry and working, when conditions allow, of course, across the UK and abroad. These meetings are designed to keep you informed of what's happening across our patch, and we speak to people who operate at the regional and national level who have a strong Coventry and Warwickshire connection. I know there's a lot of you joining, encouragingly, for the first time, so thank you very much indeed for that. If you'd like to learn more about the Champions, please do contact Nick Erskine online. Nick runs the programme and his details are available on the Champions website. Our hashtag today is ChampsJune, so please do tweet away. That would be great. We're also joined by people watching live on YouTube as well. Today we're going to hear from somebody who's returned to her local roots after a successful year in politics, reaching ministerial level. Then we're going to hear from the businesswoman at the helm of Severn Trent, a FTSE 100 company based here in Coventry. I keep saying here when I'm not in Coventry, but anyway. And then we'll catch up with the CEOs of our two major local authorities. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box and I'll put them to the speakers today, technology allowing. Our first speaker is Margot James, who is now the chair of the Warwick Manufacturing Group. As MP for Stourbridge for 9 years, she served as Minister of State for the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. And previously, she served as a Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, with the responsibility relevantly for this group for small business, consumers, corporate governments, including labour markets. In 1985, Margot founded Shire Health Group, which she grew to over 100 staff. And subsequently, she served on the Europe, Middle East and Africa board of Ogilvy Mather, leading their European healthcare programmes. But she started life here, well, notionally here in Coventry. Margot, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Adam.
No, nice to see you.
Very nice to be here.
And tell us about your upbringing in Coventry, your roots, your family. Just give us a bit of an insight into that, if you would.
Yes, I mean, on my father's side of my family, several generations of Coventrians on both sides. And on my mother's side, she was born in Earlsdon, and her dad was born in Coventry, and her mother was from Bradford. So I am, I'm a Coventrian. She escaped to a nursing home in Leamington, where I was born, and then I went back to Stychel. And then my dad built a place just off Kenilworth Road. So that's where I really grew up, because I moved there when I was very young. I don't remember living in Stychel. My sister was 9 years older than me, so she does. And but I just remember life, very funnily enough, very near to the university. In fact, I remember it being built. We could see all the green space and the fields and everything, and slowly but surely the building works commenced. So I have literally come back to my roots.
Yeah, and were your parents were in business locally?
My father was, yes. My father, he left school at 17, you know, and he went into his dad had a small haulage business, which in those days was a horse and cart. And my dad was very ambitious, and he worked for Joseph Lucas for a time, and then he answered an ad for a salesman's job in the coal trade. And he soon founded his own haulage business, starting delivering coal, and then he delivered cars, waste disposal, all sorts of things he went into, all operating from Mile Lane in Coventry.
Oh, right, very near the centre. And were you the typical product of a self-employed person? Were you in the office on Saturdays and doing, you know, cheap child labour?
Funnily enough, no. My dad, I mean, he worked very hard, but it wasn't like today. You know, I can remember him coming home for lunch. He never went to the office at the weekends. When he had a deal on, he would be on the phone a lot, you know, in the evening and at weekends. But in general, you know, he worked hard, but it didn't interrupt his family life to the same extent that work does for a lot of families today.
Yeah, and politics does, I'm sure. We'll come on to that.
Yes.
So, was it a political household? Where did the interest in politics come from?
Not really. My father had a general disdain for all politicians and political parties.
None of us are saying anything, Margaret.
I'm sure you wouldn't agree with that, Adam. Yeah, he had a general disdain, but he did support the Conservative Party. You know, he donated, his company made donations, not huge, but modest donations to the regional office of the Conservative Party. So I suppose to that extent, you know, he was conservative minded. And I do remember as a child annoying him. It must have been in the '64 elections by saying that I hoped that Harold Wilson would win, and that annoyed him. But no, it wasn't particularly a political household until I came along. Right. And my political engagement really started when my father's business was made virtually impossible to run by the militant trade unionism, which disfigured Coventry at the time, you know, going back to the 70s. And that's changed now, but at the time it was a big thing. And, you know, that really got my goat, and I got involved as a response to that, really.
And talk us through the how you set up your company and what was between sort of leaving school and setting up.
Well, quite a while, really. I had a number of false starts, but I wanted to go into politics, but at the time it would have been completely impossible for anyone who was in a same-sex relationship and not willing to hide it. Quite impossible to be even nominated, let alone win an election. So I knew at the time, I thought, well, I can't do that. So all I knew was business, really. I went to university. I went to London School of Economics. So that was good. But I then went back to work for my dad. I had a few other jobs as well, but I also worked for my dad. I learned a huge amount from him, not just through working for him formally, but just growing up in a household that was very much dominated by his business. You know, I thought in those days, well, if I can't go into politics, I'll start my own business like Dad. And that was really what it was. Yeah. And I found the opportunity, you know, I think it was about 1986. I was by then, you know, I was almost 30. And so, you know, that's when I started, a bit under late 20s.
Oh, and what did Shire Health do?
It was a marketing services business. Not dissimilar from your own, Adam, I suspect, but we specialised in healthcare, and all our clients were pharmaceutical companies or, you know, healthcare product manufacturers. And we did a combination of public relations, medical education, conference organising, all of that sort of thing for pharma companies. And I mean, it was very fortunate that I ended up in that sector, really, because it was recession proof, even COVID proof. You know, it's a very hardy sector. And it, throughout my association with it anyway, and beyond, it's always been investing in its portfolio, in marketing support and so forth. So it was a good sector to be in.
And you sold out? You got taken over?
Yes, I sold my business in the late 90s to WPP, which is a multinational advertising and media group owned, well, not owned actually, but at the time run by Sir Martin Sorrell. And I sold my business to WPP, and it was a great deal, you know, for them and for us actually. And I thought I'd just stay there, you know, for a few years while we completed the earnout. You know, for those people not familiar with earnouts, it's basically when you sell a service business in that sector, you tend to get a down payment and then you get 2 installments further on down the line related to the profits that you earn while you're in the new company's ownership. So I thought I'd probably leave at the end of that, but actually I enjoyed it so much and I learned so much from being part of a huge company that I decided to stay, and they gave me a very interesting job across Europe. Yeah, so I stayed probably about sort of 7 or 8 years. And then I went into politics. It's something I'd always wanted to do. And by then, of course, it was quite possible for me to go into politics.
But quite a few people had gone into politics who are in similar relationships and just kept that quiet. That was never an option for you? Well,
I suppose it would have been possibly, but the trouble was when I was at university, I was with, and we're still great friends actually, a really high-profile gay rights activist. So there were too many people who knew about that, and I felt that I would always be looking over my shoulder, and I didn't want that. I don't like to be in hock to anyone, and so I thought, well, I'll sit it out. And I thought probably at the time that it would never happen, but then it's amazing the sort of progress that we've seen in equality matters and so many other areas of life since those days.
So how do you go from deciding to leave a career in industry to getting a seat in the first place? Was that just through your active world in Conservative?
It's quite, it's very much the luck of the draw. You have to, initially you have to apply to the party. I think it's probably similar for the other parties as well. You apply to the party centrally and you say you're interested and you get an interview. And if they sort of weed out people who they think are not, you know, consistent with their values and so forth. But as long as you are, then you go through to quite a grueling day-long session with a number of other candidate hopefuls. And you finally get put on the nationally approved list of parliamentary candidates. And then when there is a vacancy at a local level, when a local Conservative association is looking for a candidate, they have to notify the party's headquarters, and then they get the list of candidates, and then it's up to you to apply. So nobody gives you anything. You don't get parachuted in. There's a lot of myths about this, but you have to apply. Now, some people are either incredibly gifted and talented or incredibly lucky, and they get, you know, a safe seat almost immediately. Needless to say, that did not happen to me. And I fought a safe Labour seat to get some experience in 2005. And then after that, I applied to a few others, and I finally got Stourbridge.
Right. And forgive me if this is wrong, an MP for about 10 years, but quite a rapid rise into the ministerial ranks. It didn't feel like
rapid to me, I must say. It was very frustrating, actually. I think people think if they've had a reasonably successful career in another sector, I think people think, and I think I was guilty of this, that you know, you had a lot to offer, and you would, you know, soon your talents would be recognised, and you'd be asked to serve in government. That certainly did not happen to me for about 5 years, really, because I did serve as a parliamentary private secretary, which is a sort of apprenticeship. It's unpaid. It's very valuable, in fact. But I did that, and then in 2015, I got made a government whip, and that was the first sort of semi-ministerial job that I had in government, and they didn't pay me. I always remember that. They said, well, we need a couple of unpaid people and you're one of them. So that wasn't too great, but I did it for the experience. It was a great experience. And then when Theresa May became Prime Minister, she appointed me to my first ministerial post, well, my first departmental post, and that was fantastic.
Yeah, and to be fair, she furthered the career of a lot of female politicians through that mentoring group she had, didn't she?
Yes, she did. Yeah, Cameron operated really via unofficial quotas. I mean, he had said rather loosely that he wanted a third of his government to be female by a certain year. And so what happens there, which is really why I don't really like quotas, I accept there's sometimes a need for them. But the problem with them is that as soon as you get somewhere near the quota, then they just discount everybody else. And I think it can actually work against good people as well as for but it does work, I suppose, for the collective whole. So there are arguments for it.
And your
Theresa
portfolio,
she did bring on a lot of good women, that's true.
I mean, we sometimes sit back as a member of the public and think, well, and perhaps I'll use Jeremy Wright as an example of, when he was digital culture and sport, and he didn't have a Twitter account, he didn't particularly like sport, I don't know what culture he liked. Sometimes as an outsider, it's hard for us to see why ministers get certain portfolios. But for you, you're obviously chosen for the two major roles that you had from the background that you'd had in industry.
Yes, I mean, sometimes you get, round pegs in round holes, and luckily I was that, because when you get the first departmental role, it is incredibly challenging. The briefs are very, very broad, and you find that, you read out my job title, and that was what it said on the tin, but behind that there was responsibility for loads of other things, some of which were really important, and it is an impossibility to give all elements of your brief the sort of detailed attention that they deserve. Quite impossible. You have to just prioritize, and you do come to rely a great deal on the civil servants, and I must say that was a wonderful experience. I always had a high regard for the civil service, but when I came to work with them closely, that was absolutely confirmed, and they really are a jewel in the crown in this country.
Before anybody sues me, by the way, I'll say artistic-wise, Jeremy is very good at Lego. We know that, don't we? So
yes, that's true. That is true.
So how soon, when you saw the tide of what was or what happened with Brexit and your views, did you think your days were numbered then? Did you see it as, how do you sort of view it?
Well, when I look back, what is interesting is that I did find it very difficult to, I mean, obviously, we had the referendum. Yep. My constituency voted by 64% to leave. So I knew that we had to leave. And we'd had the referendum and that was final. But of course, a simple yes, no question, do you want to stay in or do you want to leave, doesn't then give the government any kind of steer on how you want to leave. And so I had an opinion that we should leave in an orderly manner with a decent deal. And I felt that during my time in Stourbridge, there were a number of things that the majority of my constituents were very frustrated by, most of all the freedom of movement, and some European court decisions which went down badly. And those were the things that people really disliked. So I thought we could probably stay in the single market and put all those other things right. Now, I was wrong about that because, of course, you couldn't get the EU to accept us staying in the single market and removing ourselves from free movement. So I accept that. But then we could have stayed in a customs union. All of these things I thought were doable. But as time went by, it became increasingly clear that it was going to be very difficult for the government. Of course, by then it had lost its majority, to get anything other than a complete break through the House of Commons, because there was a chunk of Conservative MPs who would never vote for anything that Theresa May negotiated. So increasingly I felt, my days are numbered, but I really loved my job. So several times I thought, I can't live with this, I'm going to have to step down. And I didn't, because I thought it's not going to do any good. I'm loyal to Theresa May, and okay, I'll stick with it. And carry on with my day job. And I was very lucky with my day job because it didn't have a huge amount of Brexit related matter in it, really. A bit, but not a huge amount. So I stayed. But looking back, I felt all the time that, you know, I wouldn't really survive forever, because I could see the way that the Brexit politics was going. And in the end, it went in a direction I couldn't really live with. So I stepped down.
And I mean, you know, high profile people who like Ed Balls, Michael Portillo have talked about what it's like to lose their seat or at least lose their role. What is it like that one day you're a minister and then next day you're not?
I think it partly depends how you lose it. At first, I stepped down from the government in July of last year, and we were about to go into summer recess. So it was in some ways quite a relief, because the workload is very, very intense. I mean, even when you're not, even those few moments in the week when you're carving out some time for yourself and your family and you're not working, your mind's your mind's still on the work. And I did find that very relentless, although I loved it. So at first I was quite liberated, actually. And then when we got back after the summer recess, there was so much sort of engagement in the new government and what was happening and the possible prorogue of Parliament and the threat of leaving without a deal by the end of October and all of that sort of kept me very occupied. And I didn't miss it that much because I didn't agree with the direction the government was taking. I missed it more when I left Parliament altogether. That's when I really missed it.
And then from after politics, do you have a period of where you sit down and contemplate what you're going to do next? What sort of happens? And then as part of that, how did the WMG role come up?
Well, the WMG role came up like manna from heaven, actually. When I was least expecting it, I was in the car and a headhunter called me before Christmas and said, look, they got the assignment to find somebody to lead WMG. And I think she was actually asking me whether I might recommend someone that she could then...
And you said, yes, I'm up for it.
But I knew WMG. I visited it 3 times.
Well, of course,
of course, you know. And I had a huge regard for it. And I also knew that it had played a huge role in the development of the industrial strategy, which I'm a great believer in. So when I was amazed. And I thought, well, that is something I could do and I would really love doing it. And it has the sort of meaning and importance that quite a lot of what I did in government had. And I thought it would do more to replace what I'd lost than, you know, a lot of other jobs might have done. So I was really pleased when I was considered and then finally got the appointment in February.
I was just getting a great impression of the headhunter ringing the office and they went, no, we wanted just to get her opinion, not for her to apply for the job. And what about just on well known to all the people on this call, what about having to be the person who follows Lord Bhattacharya? How does that sit?
Well, I don't look at it like that. Lord Bhattacharya is irreplaceable. Yeah. Truly irreplaceable. You know, there's no superlatives that I can think of really too great to describe what an immense vision he had and how energetically and incredibly well he executed that vision. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. Obviously, there was over a year between Lord Bhattacharya passing on and my appointment, because I didn't start till April the 1st. And I think that helped a little bit. I think to have gone in so soon after he had passed away would have been more difficult, because I think those comparisons would have inevitably been made. But I don't put that pressure on myself. I'll do the best I can. I'll give it my best possible shot. I've got a great team of people there. I mean, amazing team of people who've been there many years. A lot of them, some new people, but a lot of them have been there many years. And they've kept it together and grown it since Lord Bhattacharya died. So you know, it's a great thing to inherit, and I intend to, you know, put it on its path for the future, very loyal to the principles that Lord Bhattacharya had throughout his tenure, and hopefully expand it beyond what it's been in the past.
And for those people who sort of know of WMG and hear the initials, if you had to sort of give an elevator pitch of what it does and the probably unique position it still holds, what would you say?
Well, you're right. The word is unique. I mean, it is a unique marriage between very high academic standards of research and industry need. And it's a true partnership between industry and academia, such that academia is informed constantly by what industry really needs. And industry, likewise, has the very best and latest research and innovation provided by our fabulous team of researchers and educators. So it is a perfect marriage. We've got unique properties in our laboratories. You know, we're world leaders in batterification, in decarbonisation. There's a lot more to WMG though than what it's famous for, which is the automotive industry and sector. I mean, we're doing masses of work now in healthcare, in digital, cybersecurity, aerospace, I mean, marine, you know, shipping. I mean, it's a very, very big thing now. It's not just automotive.
We had a question actually from one of the champions, Mike Ballinger, which is suitable now, saying, so with your role in government, seeing what's happened with Brexit now in WMG, what should the government be doing now to encourage manufacturing?
Well, I think in the short term, the government needs to support the big sectors of manufacturing which have seen a collapse in income and broken supply chains. I think that's the most important thing, is to protect the research and development and protect the skilled jobs. I mean, you know, there's been quite substantial layoffs of skilled engineers from Airbus, from Rolls-Royce, from JLR. And we've got to make sure that those skills do not wither on the vine, that they are engaged, and we will need government support to do that. So I think that that's the most important thing in the short term. In the longer term, I think what we all want to see, including government, is without succumbing to protectionism, I think we do need to have more resilient supply chains. I think that we've had in too many sectors exposure that Britain's approach, and the manufacturing sector, I'm afraid, is culpable here, of sourcing the cheapest possible supply of components wherever in the world they may be, has been found wanting. And I think—
And sorry to interrupt, is that pressure from OEMs though, for them to just bring costs down constantly?
Yes, but you have to ask yourself why that doesn't seem to be so strongly the case in other countries. And I think that we need to have a longer term view of what constitutes shareholder value. And it isn't always the cheapest possible price at the minute you're making the order. You have to consider the longer term and the reliability and the sustainability of your supply chain. And I think that's the big lesson here. And we need to make sure, the other thing that the government need to do is to make sure that the final deal that they negotiate with the European Union allows tariff-free trade and, as far as possible, frictionless trade at the borders as well.
And how confident are you of that?
I know the Prime Minister wants a deal. I know he knows that's important. I think he must, I haven't spoken to him since the election, but I think he must be aware that with the COVID crisis and the damage that's done to manufacturing, manufacturing could do without a double whammy of the COVID, you know, the post-COVID recovery, followed swiftly by tariffs and delays at the borders would, you know, really be very, very damaging. And I think he knows that. I think he knows people's livelihoods depend on a decent deal. And I'm hopeful that he will get one. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
And just lastly, you've got some experience with this area. We were saying earlier on that the whole business support environment with, you know, University of Warwick through WMG, through LEP, Chamber, Growth Hub, seems to be a good network here. Yes. and a good environment. Will that stand us in better stead than places that don't have such a good network? Yes,
I think it will. I think you've rightly pointed out, we've got a great network here. We've got one of the best LEPs in the country. The Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnerships is one of the best in the country. We've also got a fantastic mayor. Andy Street is gets everything to do with manufacturing. He knows how important it is, and he's got the ear of the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. So, and also we have a lot of constituencies who voted Conservative for the first time in the Midlands at the last election. So that we've got MPs who can put pressure on the government as well. So yes, I think, I mean, you might have seen the fantastic prospectus that the West Midlands Combined Authority published yesterday, and in that they do make clear that the West Midlands is actually under threat of suffering from the COVID crisis more than most regions. But I think that what we've got, as you rightly say, Adam, is a really, really good ecosystem and a good network, and backed by a good mayor. And I think that we will get, you know, some very good support.
Brilliant. Well, Margaret, George Close, thank you very much indeed from everybody. It's a bit odd when you can't see people. I'm sure they're all thanking you and applauding. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry we didn't get to answer that gentleman's question about China and Huawei, but maybe you'll ask your next panelist about that.
And you know, as I always have been, as University of Warwick are champions, please, we'll get you the invitation. Do dial in again as a guest next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Margot James, everybody. Our next guest is Christine Hodgson, who is the new chair of Severn Trent, based in the city of Coventry. Christine spent 22 years at Capgemini, where she was chairman of the UK business, the global chief CSR officer, and a member of the group executive committee. Christine is the senior independent director of Standard Chartered PLC and chair of their remuneration committee. She sits on the board of the Prince of Wales charity, Business in the Community, which you'll be familiar with, and also chairs the Careers and Enterprise Company, an independent company that she was asked to set up by the government to help inspire and prepare young people for the world of work. She's also a fellow, I beg your pardon, of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. Christine, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Adam, my pleasure.
And you joined Severn Trent in January and then took the chair in April. Interesting timing. What sort of a baptism has it been in that role for you?
Well, very interesting when you're moving jobs and you're working basically from your office, or in my case, my bedroom, on the 31st of March, and then I'm doing a different job from my bedroom on the 1st of April for a different company. I mean, luckily for me,
you have to remember to dial into the right calls, don't you? Yeah.
I mean, luckily for me that before lockdown, I was lucky enough to do about 25 days of induction with Severn Trent. So I got out, I managed to see a lot of the sites, go to a lot of the works, meet lots and lots of people, and that has made the passage that much easier. So yeah, it is difficult times. I mean, COVID is affects Severn Trent like it affects every other organisation. Of course, the mission of Severn Trent, you know, we're looking after one of life's essentials, water, and never has the provision of water been more important at a time when hygiene is a number one priority. So, but I've been so impressed. I mean, as a utility, it's actually used to running incident management is a core competency. So although you could say COVID is a different level of incidents, it's just sort of clicked into like a military operation, the way that it's running the business. So I've been very impressed with the way that it's supported the colleagues, looked after their health and well-being, because obviously that's critical. There are lots of key workers on the front line every day, looked after the communities, and looked after customers, a lot of vulnerable customers that need looking after. So it's not easy joining at this time, but actually I'm already very proud of the organisation that I'm chairing.
So are you on sort of Zoom calls regularly? Is that how the board?
Yeah,
do you meet more regularly at this time than you would do normally as a board, or not?
As a board, I mean, different with the various boards I'm on, I would say yes, generally we are meeting more regularly. Yeah. Certainly the chief exec and I, Liv Garfield, we're in constant touch. So because the situation is evolving all the time. I mean, things just emerging that are new. I mean, so for example, water consumption is at a sort of all-time high. If you looked at the half-term week, you had the combination of people washing their hands much longer, as we're all encouraged to do, people staying at home because they're obviously not going on holiday for half-term. There was the very hot weather, people watering their gardens, because of course May, lots of gardening going on, paddling pools, people washing the cars, and all of a sudden you get consumption at all-time highs. And so again, that is a sort of partly COVID related, but not only. And we're having to manage that is really quite challenging, because the last thing you want is anybody to run out of water, as I say, at a time when hygiene is so important.
And I know you're not at that operational end, but has that come close? Have we been short of water? Are we all set for a hosepipe ban, or?
Touch wood, hopefully not. I mean, Severn Trent hasn't had a hosepipe ban since about 1975, but I think what we are encouraging everybody to do is to be really thoughtful about their consumption, and don't waste good quality drinking water. Just be thoughtful and manage it. So no, hopefully we won't end up in that situation, but we've just got to be very careful on consumption. I think that is the message for everybody. Just do everything that you can to be thoughtful and don't waste it.
And because of the geography of the Severn Trent area, I mean, it is an extremely complex organisation, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a huge. You've got a huge patch across the Midlands, across a number of counties, and very different needs across that patch. But and it's landlocked. It's not like some of the other water companies that are next to the sea. We're landlocked. So it is complex, but it's extremely well run. I mean, I've been lucky enough to, I'm sure, Adam, you've probably interviewed Liv Garfield at some point. We're lucky enough to have a superb leader. She's got a fantastic team around her. And the thing that has amazed me most since I joined the company is the fact that people love working for Severn Trent. It's a company that's got a huge social purpose. Of course, everybody that works for Severn Trent, or most of them, are customers. They're families, they're communities. They're wanting to look after their local communities, and people love working for it, and they're going that extra mile. So it's a good time, and it's a good time to be seeing what the company is giving to the community. I mean, I think everybody talks about CSR, don't they? And they talk about how much they give. I mean, Severn Trent really gives a lot. It's got, for example, this January it launched a community fund.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Yeah,
so it committed over the next 5 years. The regulatory cycle works in 5 years. So it's just launched a 10 million fund, which prepared to give to not-for-profit, for charities, for community groups, grants between sort of 2,000 or right up to £250,000, where these groups can apply for these community grants, and I think it's terrific. So already there's been about 39 projects supported, 700,000 given, and on top of that, when COVID struck, the company committed another £1 million to an emergency fund, half of which was really to support those vulnerable groups, for food banks, mental health charities, domestic abuse charities, and the other half set aside to help the recovery. Some organisations who in themselves are going to need some help to stay alive. So there's that as well. And then, as I say, I mentioned about the consumption of water. We've also just had this novel initiative recently, where we've said for every 150 million litres of water that's saved in a month, we will put another 1 million into charity. So loads of things going on, but loads of giving to the community and supporting people who are vulnerable.
And what's the take-up been like for applications to the fund? Has it been good? Is there more to come? Do you need more?
We always like to get great applications, of course. There's no shortage of good applications. There was no shortage of good applications for the emergency fund either, as you would expect. And they're extremely grateful for the support. So yeah, let's keep the applications coming, but we're not short.
Well, Paul Evans, who sits on the place board, has told us all about it.
Yeah, I see he's on the call. Hello, Paul.
We have informed everybody. So, and when does that close? When is that people?
It's 5 years. So the 10 million is over the next 5 years.
Yeah. So, okay. And just lastly, your not away from Severn Trent, your interest in young people's career through the Careers and Enterprise Company. And obviously, Margot talked about the implications of COVID and Brexit and what have you. For young people, particularly COVID, it's come at a very vulnerable time for some people when they're either thinking of university or college or leaving those. I would think the work of that company has never been more vital, has it?
Absolutely. So perhaps just to give you a little word of background on the Careers and Enterprise Company. So 5 years ago, Nicky Morgan, when she was Secretary of State for Education, asked me to set up this company to help connect business and schools. Because
can I just interrupt? Why did she ask you? What have you done in your career that made? Because
at the time I was chairman of Capgemini in the UK. Capgemini is a technology services business. And we'd had a very big focus on apprenticeships and developing the skills of young people. We had a massive schools outreach program where we reached 5,000 young people every year with quite innovative work experience and work encounters. And so she asked me to set the company up as fully funded by Department for Education, but separate, but independent. And she said, go work with the LEPs. So you just mentioned Coventry and Warwickshire LEP, which work with the LEPs to create this network of business volunteers who can go in and give a day a month, going into schools and helping to connect the school with the local business community. So trying to help inspire and prepare those young people for the world of work. Because the evidence shows that if a young person gets 4 or more encounters with the world of work while they're at secondary school, then on average, they'll be 5 times less likely to end up NEET. And on average, they'll earn 18% more. So the evidence shows that those connections between business and schools are so important. And when we kicked off, the landscape was completely chaotic. Lots of businesses wanting to help, lots of schools wanting that help. But frankly, the two didn't really connect very well. So we've created this network, we've created digital tools, and now we're working with 80% of the secondary schools in England. And yeah, to your point, it has never been more important than ever. Obviously, there's going to be some catch up for those young people who've been even more disadvantaged than others because of the COVID and because of lockdown and because they don't have access to all the same digital tools that some children have. And I think that there's been some superb interactions virtually. We had a week of work last week. We're working with the Oak National Academy and Learn Live, which was 130,000 young people and parents came and did sort of encounters virtually. And so again, it's all just trying to spark some interest in these young people and to show them that there are going to still be opportunities out there. I love the government's announcement recently that every young person can have an apprenticeship. Of course, that's going to have to be paid for. I personally hope that it comes with a revision of the apprenticeship levy. So yeah, it's something that I feel absolutely passionately about, and I think businesses need to do an awful lot. I think we should, at the moment, I know lots of businesses struggling to survive, but never has it been more important to, honour the apprenticeships and give young people a chance, or at least give them the insight into what the world of work is all about.
Well, you say those 2 stats that you quoted at the start is justification enough. Now we've had one question. I'm going to read it out, and we have sent it to you. It's from Richard Dixon, who's saying, in light of climate change, COVID-19, and the events prompted by the death of George Floyd, what is your view on the concept of purposeful company, as promoted this week by the British Academy, and is something that's especially relevant to the business sector in Coventry, given our unique status as a city of peace and reconciliation? That might mean more to you than it does to me. It means probably not to Richard, but what's the answer?
I guess how I see the sort of definition of what a purposeful company is all about is a company that's not just about driving profit, but it's about looking after all the stakeholders, and it's about taking a longer term view. So, and I think, many ways, Severn Trent, I of course I would say this, but I do think Severn Trent is operating in that way. It is really trying to look after both its investors, the communities, the customers, and its colleagues. And I believe that more than ever before, companies are going to have to take this very seriously. So Richard, I do think that the concept of a purposeful company is critical. I think we need to look at much more sort of compassionate capitalism, and I think the companies that emerged from COVID stronger will be the companies that take this seriously, for whom it's not just some sort of, you know, add-on or nice to do. It's absolutely fundamental in the way they look after their people, the way that they look after the communities in which they operate. And it's not a race to the line in getting back to the bottom line profits. It's much more profound than that.
Christine, thank you. Thank you for joining us now. And I have to say, your dog kept admirably quiet. We didn't hear any yapping going on.
Wait for it.
From child or dog. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you for everybody who's on the call. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we don't often say this, but this genuinely, our next two guests are backed by popular demand. We're going to hear from Monica Fogarty, the CEO of Warwickshire County Council, and Martin Reeves, the CEO of Coventry City Council. They kindly spoke at our last meeting, and we had great feedback on the update that they gave us. And obviously, things are moving on a daily basis. So since then, things have moved on greatly. Town and city centres have started to open up, and we're interested in what the challenges have been for that and how they see the future. We're going to start, if we can, Monica, first of all with you, because I gather you're sort of quite involved with the sub-regional test and trace pilot that we've got across the Midlands. So if you could just briefly describe what it is, how it's working, and what sort of area it covers.
Okay, so people will all have heard of Test and Trace. It's a national programme which is about getting people tested for COVID and then tracing the contacts that they've interacted with, so that we can alert people to be tested themselves and to self-isolate, and that's about containing the virus. So nationally there are 11 beacons, which are really like a sort of a good practice network, and Warwickshire, along with Coventry and Solihull, came together to show our interest to be a beacon for this area, and we succeeded in that. So we're one of the 11 beacons, which means that we are committed to sharing our learning and our best practice. That includes making mistakes. When we make mistakes, share the learning from those with our colleagues across the wider West Midlands, but also nationally. So we have, across the sub-region, we've pulled together our outbreak management plan, working with our 3 directors of public health. And so that will be published at the end of June. And that's been a huge amount of work gone into that, to actually, you know, map out all the ways, the things we have to do in identifying outbreaks and containing outbreaks and minimising infection. And because Coventry and Warwickshire work as one so closely, you know, we had absolute confidence that we were going to be able to do this. And someone did say to me the other day, it's like being asked to build a plane while you're learning to fly. And so that's very much what we're doing. You know, we're building it as we go along, but so far so good.
Well, actually, this might be a reflection of Middle England, but I do know that the other day it was quicker to book a test at the Ricoh Arena than it was to get a slot at the Kenilworth Tip. So that's how well you've organised it. I have to say, you've organised the tip very well as well. It's the only tip I know that it's actually on Eventbrite. So anyway, you book your slot that way. And Martin, we've you know, regularly probably go into Coventry City Centre now than perhaps 2 or 3 weeks ago. What are the challenges of an authority, I'll come to you first, of beginning to open up a city centre, both in terms of that perhaps new balance between foot traffic, road traffic, and then also ensuring citizen safety?
Before I'll answer, before I do that, can I just genuinely, as a punter, listening to both Margot and Christine, just thank them for their contributions. I was transfixed. So I'm for different really fascinating insights and really a lot of candor. So thanks very much for that. It was brilliant. I've now got my head around being a contributor. But in terms of the city centre, one of the things that, and Monica and other colleagues will see is in the public sector, as we see guidance following ministerial statements, a lot of them, and I've said this when we did this in May, a lot of them come down these kind of completely vertical lines. The latest one obviously is about licensing. But what we have to do, and Coventry City Centre is a good example, is we have to deal with the lockdown easing across all of those verticals. So you've got an issue where you're able to open up non-essential retail. We've then got the issue on the 4th of July, obviously, with the licensing establishments, food and beverage potentially. And at the same time, Adam, when what people need to realize is that human behavior, mode of transport, the way in which people are behaving in spaces is very difficult to predict at the moment. So in the city council areas, for example, around the city centre, we're seeing something like about a third of the capacity of our car parks. We're seeing quite a significant uplift in footfall, 80–90% of what we'd expect for an equivalent time before. And yet we're seeing very little use of public transport. So clearly there's a lot of other ways in which people are finding their ways into the city centre, and particularly how they're navigating around it. So just imagine what it's been like for all of our colleagues to think about how you can manage what already is a really busy urban space for us in the city centres. We've got major construction works going on, getting us ready for City of Culture, doing the distancing, the queue management, at the same time as well as trying to sensitively manage the protests from Black Lives Matter, the marches and various other things. So it's been a very difficult environment to be able to manage safely, but also to be able to react very quickly. There's not, again, as I said last time, a playbook. There's not a book you can just pick up and go, this is what you do. So we're really trying to react quickly to this. So patience is required from stakeholders, I think. We'll inevitably make mistakes.
Do you think people have shown patience, by and large, stakeholders?
I think that's a really interesting question. And Monica, have a view. I think, and yeah, we heard this from Margot, and look, businesses, small, medium and large, just want to get back to be able to work full capacity. They want to protect their businesses. But actually, all the conversations I've had, there's been a lot of patience and respect and understanding from businesses. By and large, from what I've seen across, if you like, our residents, Coventrians, consumers in that environment, they've been really, in the main, respectful and patient about the fact that things will have to be different. And we are going to live with COVID, the queuing management, the fact that facilities will not be open in the same way, that we will not be able to, as a local authority, to deliver all of their needs in the same way. And you talked about the tips and the way we've managed that. People have to get used to the fact that things will be different and maybe not as instantaneous as they were once used to. So I think my answer to your question is, by and large, when you consider all of the tectonic plates shifting all over the place, and there's a livelihood, there's a health and well-being at stake, I think people have across the city and county been really patient, yeah.
I would never want to split up what is now a double act, but Monica, Martin's got a pedestrianised city centre with a nice ring road and what have you. You, in terms of roads, are responsible for some market towns and having to make big changes, and that is difficult for people, for traders to take, isn't it?
Absolutely, Adam. I mean, I have to say it's been quite a bumpy couple of weeks this past fortnight. So, you know, what we're trying to do is to jumpstart the economy and get those businesses and shops and retail back into action. At the same time, instill a confidence and a sense of safety in residents that it is actually safe for them to go out into their town centres. So balancing social distancing and all the space that takes up in narrow streets, along with keeping the roads open and allowing people to access car parking so they can pop into the shops. That's very, very difficult in some small town spaces. I think there's also something to consider here about the return to business as usual versus fundamentally changed customer attitudes. So, you know, there's a question about, will people radically change how they shop, work and interact with their local communities as a result of COVID and lockdown? Or as the restrictions are lifted, will people drift back to how things were before? And I think, you know, we're not through that yet. We don't have that clarity. Clearly, there's a vast amount of the population that aren't quite comfortable going back out into society. But at the same time, you know, as economic leaders, we've absolutely got to give our businesses a footing to get back up there. So it's a really fine balancing act.
Do you think there's been I'm not trying to egg you on, Monica, but do you think there's a feeling of some traders, particularly retail trade, that, right, you can open again, and they expected it, even if maybe not logistically to be normal, that customer flows would be the same as they were before, and it's going to be a lot longer climb back than perhaps they realise?
I think it is. I mean, in the first couple of days when the non-essential businesses and shops opened, we saw quite a rush and people were patient and queuing. But certainly over the past couple of weeks, things have slowed down quite significantly. So it's certainly in the small town centre high streets that the levels of footfall are way down on whatever they were before. And I think actually people have also become accustomed to shopping local with their corner shops and quite an amount of online shopping. So, you know, it might be that these are habits and behaviours that people are going to find it difficult to pull back from.
Well, it's funny for both of you. Alejandro Perez, who's a champion, has asked about new technology and the role of that post-COVID. And this might be anecdotal. I'm finding perhaps a slightly older generation it's been the biggest lesson in adopting technology that they've ever had to have, online shopping and also retailing, paying on phones. Is that a lesson that can be learned by both authorities and retailers? Monica first.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go on. You're okay, Martin. Go
on. Thanks, Monica. We're so polite. Look, we've heard already from about Warwick Manufacturing Group, the great universities we've got, the fact that we're a 5G test bed around this area. So we've got a significant amount of data capability, but also an ambition around that. So to give you one example, my view around, for example, what we've spoken about, how people are now going to mill around and interact with each other in this post-COVID world in, for example, city and town centres. You can do real-time data play on this with sensor technology, but actually what, in my view, is even more powerful is actually aerial real-time footage of actually how people are congregating, interacting with retail spaces. Because what people on this call will realise, but the sensitivity of this is not so much what goes on inside retail and inside four walls. It's about what happens on the immediate curtilage. Can you imagine the power of drone technology linked to 5G data capability to give instantaneous data and video footage for not just us to be able to manage that, but also for people, consumers, to make their own decisions about when they decide to come in to shop or to come to food and beverage. And one of the things, listening to Monica and the work that she's leading on for us now around the test and trace, no one should underestimate, and we both said this last time, this is all about confidence. There's people on this call that will have different views about lockdown easing and about if there's some dissonance between schools not opening in some spaces, pubs. But the truth about all of this is there will be outbreaks in the future. So the test and trace and the confidence for us in Coventry, Warwickshire and Solihull to understand that data using technology, but also using good old-fashioned contact to be able to stop it immediately, deal with it, means we can confidently reopen settings and environments without having a blanket closure. That is really important for the economy, it's important for communities, and it's important for consumers. So I think this is tough stuff, but bring on digital, bring on new equipment and new opportunities, because I think we've all learned that actually this is the way in which we're going to become more productive and effective in the future.
And Monica, with Warwickshire, you've got geographically some isolated communities, so presumably technology for them is important for a different reason.
Yeah, and I do think that one of the positives to come out of the pandemic is the absolute acceleration of the rollout of ICT and our dependency in order to be able to conduct semi-normal lives, working lives with ICT. I think, as Martin was saying, that data has been absolutely central to the COVID response, so that we can use an intelligence, evidence-based response. But a picture paints 1,000 words, and it's like if you're going to get in your car on a bank holiday weekend, sometimes the thing you do is you look at the traffic cams to tell you what it's like out there on the roads. And I think for us, being able to understand how communities are moving about their business, to be able to use drones and to be able to use tech that translates data into real information that people can relate to, I think that's one of the innovation challenges that we need to step up to now within local government and within business generally, making it more accessible and more understandable to our service users.
And that will be music to Alejandro's ears as he runs a drone business. So we've talked about opening up of city centres, and obviously people are not supposed to go back to work in the workplace unless they need to. Obviously, schools is an issue that crops up in terms of getting those back. That's one of several things that at the moment are hurdles that have got to be overcome. Monica.
Sorry, Adam, I wasn't listening.
I was reading. Don't worry. I was saying there are several things that need to be got over for normality. To, you know, people going back into an office to work and being encouraged to do so, and having to get used to that, and also schools as well, getting back.
So it's quite clear now that schools won't be going back until the autumn. So it's good to have that clarity. That'll present its own challenges in terms of the extended period that parents will be away from their workplace. So there's also a huge challenge around the catch up for these students that have been affected for the loss of education time, and the tutoring is going to kick in, I believe, in the autumn as well. The other thing is about schooling, and as well as the sort of loss of time for students, it's all about the social and mental health impact on young people as well. I mean, there's an awful lot of hurdles we've got to get through yet before, you know, society comes back to normal. And for those of us who are running large workplaces, we've got nearly 5,000 staff, and the majority of them, 99% of those, are working from home. We did a quick spot check survey with them last week, and 60% of them want to continue working from home. Only 7% want to come into an office, and then the rest is a sort of a blended model. So, you know, this is going to be a generational change in terms of the way people work. And for us as a workplace provider, we've got a raft of stuff to do around adjusting the workspaces for social distancing, because we've got to be able to keep people safe. So as well as continuing the response to the recovery, to the response to COVID, we're now standing up recovery for ourselves as a large employer, but also for communities. And in all of that, the priority has to be to keep people safe. So that takes quite an amount of time. And keeping people patient and managing their expectations, especially some of those who are desperate to get back into the workplace, it's quite difficult.
And Martin, those changes that Monica alluded to there are going to have significant impacts on things like the commercial property industry, how we lay out offices, aren't they?
Everything is impacted. You know, listen again back to Margot's and Christine's view around the impact on, you know, employment structures, potentially a lost generation if we're not careful, vigilant. And one of the things we said, I think when we're on this session last time, I think it's become even truer, is that this pandemic, as nasty and as vicious as it is, literally nothing really has been immune from it, in the sense of it's impacted every part of sectors in industry, the way in which people obviously try and live their lives, people's own health and well-being, that of people around them. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I lead nationally for chief executives on funding and future finance, and I will tell you that as much as local government is focused quite rightly on the additional costs that we've expended directly on COVID, I'm equally, in fact, even more worried about the lost income we're seeing as the complete commercial markets change around us, the whole industry sectors change, as well as consumers finding it very difficult to get that confidence to back and spend. So every single thing that were once even probably, you know, even during the Brexit challenges, felt like pillars and strengths for us, have started to feel like they're crumbling slightly. Now that psychologically, as Monica said, is really tough at individual level. And as chief exec, I'm not going to say here that it's an easy one, because the laziness of some of the commentary right from the beginning of COVID, which is, oh, it's much easier to close things down than open up. Let me tell you, closing down schools and the multiple impacts that has, not just on the schools themselves, but on the learners, but actually the impact that has on key workers, vulnerability, people who have to go about their business, is a profound set of decisions you have to deal with. Back to my verticals, our world doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, in central government still, we're seeing kind of a lot of vertical thinking. We're having to glue this together. And I would argue that, as I said last time with Monica, in Coventry and Warwickshire, without being too arrogant, I think we've done well with our ecosystem, but also the public sectors working incredibly well together to make sense of what has been quite challenging, quite late guidance coming through from central government at times.
And just swiftly to both of you, personally, how are you coping? You know, family at home, homeschooling, all that sort of thing. Monica, first. Well, judging from your background, you just slept in the office for the last 2 months.
I have, yeah.
Now, how's it been? How's it been for you?
It's been okay, actually. I mean, there have been times when personally, you know, I felt quite fatigued and on a resilience basis. But actually, yesterday, I was just saying to a colleague that I'm getting a bit bored now. I want something new and different to do. And I think, you know, it's quite mentally draining to be so full on the one thing all the time. And you know, one of the attractions for local government is the sheer variety of services and challenges and so on, and quite a fast moving picture. We have had a fast moving picture, but it's all been the same content. So for me, keeping the resilience up is not a problem. Keeping my mental stimulation up is now proving a challenge.
There is a cure for that. It's called Rosé. Martin, what about you? How have you done in the home schooling? Well, I don't mean yourself. Obviously, well, no, I mean you being schooled. Sorry.
Trust me, Adam. As you know me well, I'm well beyond education. I said to colleagues earlier on, for those I can call, the reason I got these on is just literally to keep out the sound of a barking dog and shouting children. But I think all of us, at whatever jobs we do, have had to adapt pretty quickly to working from different environments. I think what the really interesting thing for Monica and I, you talk about where we are, is this notion of, in the old world, which we won't go back to, it's really important as public service leaders, and including our political leaders, the notion of visible leadership. We run responsible for really large organizations, but managing that with where you're most effective. And we're going to make these decisions now about operationally how we're going to operate our buildings again. Do we want to go to where our colleagues really are, to not necessarily bring them back too early, but also to accept we are different. We're a public body that does get looked at by others and say, well, everything else is opening up, so where are you at? And I think that, I'll be honest, that is really challenging, quite, again, profound decisions. But I think we've stuck together well. And finally, for me, as Monica said, the thing that's keeping us going, and certainly keeping me going now, is, as again we said last time, we were parallel running the depths of the crisis with trying to have one eye on a reset and recovery. Yeah. I'm not saying for one moment we've got both eyes on a reset and recovery now, but thankfully we're now having conversations with businesses, with developers that are positive about how we can move forward together. And as I said earlier on, Adam, in another meeting, this sub-region, in terms of its assets, its ecosystems, its support, is good or as bad as indifferent as it was pre-COVID. We've got to remind ourselves of that and harness it, but that's keeping me going. I just think we can now be more positive about talking about the future without being complacent.
Brilliant. Martin, Monica, thank you again. Honestly, we had a great reaction last time, so we may well invite you back if that will be okay, because the updates that we get from you are illuminating and some interesting stats, and also to see the pattern of as we start to hopefully come back to some sort of normal. But thank you both for joining us. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We're slightly overrun, so the Everton fan is going to be very cross with me, but just bear with me for a couple more minutes because there's some useful information, hopefully, for you. The brand new Find It in CW website has recently been launched, and we just wanted to draw your attention to it and the opportunity it presents for all sorts of businesses. The site was commissioned by the Coventry and Warwickshire LEP Growth Hub and combines the expert knowledge of the Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber of Commerce and the local authorities to offer invaluable support to businesses of all sizes. But it was designed to connect local firms with supply chain opportunities, and we all need those, and to enable business to promote their products and services to local businesses. Since the launch a few weeks ago, there are now 730 businesses registered, and they built up an online profile to receive instant opportunity alerts, with more and more signing up every day. Number of opportunities published to date is 51. The value of those opportunities is a staggering £2.9 billion. The opportunities available are certainly varied. They go from cleaning services, rebrand, design, website development, right the way through to glove manufacturing. So please do have a look at that. I know you're going to get a slide up now to talk about the new companies that have joined and become champions in recent weeks. So I would like to welcome Innate Coaching, Mobius Improvement, Positive Impact Group, Strategic Capability, and Sales Growth Consulting. I have to say, absolutely very well named, but Positive Impact Group, the MD, the owner of that company, actually gave his apologies for not making it today because his wife had given birth today. How he remembered to send his apologies was amazing, but thank you very much for that. We've got a few new companies today experiencing, as I say, Champions event for the first time. So Nick and the team will be in touch to follow up with you about becoming a champion. I'd like to also give a mention to Envy on their recent Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. David and his team are always on hand at our more conventional meetings, They are the people who direct everybody to the car parks and to the venues, and at times encouraging you to finish off that sausage sandwich because there's some guy on stage trying to get your attention. So well done to David. I'm pretty sure it's an organisation that came out of 2012 and the Ambassador Programme. So well done. They do a great job, and I'll always give you a warm welcome. A plea from me, as you know, that the tourist and hospitality industry sector has been affected probably greater than any other. We have in all areas of Coventry and Warwickshire, tourism businesses have struggled, but now as hopefully the shackles are started to be lifted from us in a responsible way, we're trying to encourage local people to visit local attractions. Now, probably like me, you're guilty of having travelled across Europe and across the country to see certain locations and attractions, but perhaps sometimes have ignored those on your doorstep. If I look out of my window now, I can see Kenilworth Castle. In truth, I haven't been around the whole of Kenilworth Castle. So what we're trying to do is encourage people to visit those places, but also to encourage others to visit a place that you might be fond of, that you know is a nice little green corner or an interesting corner of Coventry and Warwickshire. So Shakespeare's England, which is a tourist destination management for South Warwickshire, has launched #DiscoverYourDoorstep. So please, if there's somewhere you think you should be visiting and haven't, put it on Instagram, put it on Twitter, put it on Facebook with that hashtag of Discover Your Doorstep. If there's a little hint of somewhere where you think others would like to visit that they might not know about, please #Discover Your Doorstep. We've had some great interaction already and some really, really good suggestions. So please, if you could take that, that would be fantastic. Congratulations to Coventry City Football Club, who, despite not kicking a ball for several months, were crowned champions of League One, and next season will be playing in the Championship. So well done indeed to them, and we're looking forward to that. Lastly, I'd also like to thank Sophie Davis. Sophie has helped organise these meetings for the past 2 years as part of her work for Champions and for Advent, but she's leaving to take up a new role at Arnold Lodge School next week. Thank you for all your work, Sophie. This is why this system has worked so well. Many of you will be familiar with her. She's always behind the scenes, but has done a fantastic job. Just one thing from Nick and I wouldn't say that we're sentimental, but it's really sad you're leaving, but make sure Arnold Lodge become champions very, very quickly, please, at least by the end of July. Our next meeting is in August. We'll be letting you have details and date nearer the time. Again, it will be in this format. Hopefully we'll get as engaging speakers again. Hopefully we'll get such a good turnout as we have done this time. It really is appreciated. I think we've had 4 very engaging speakers today, and hopefully we've learned and got some insight from them as well. So thank you for joining. Thank you for being part of what is a very powerful network now. And please, I used to say later today, tell somebody something positive about Coventry and Warwickshire. It might have to wait until tomorrow, but please do tell them something positive about Coventry and Warwickshire. Thank you very much all for joining, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Adam. Very
well,
good.
Thank you. Thank
Very
you,
good
Christine,
raconteur.
Martin, Monica. Thank you.